Unites in support of Venezuela's legitimate leader, interim President Guaido. A transition to legitimate democracy is underway. And I have a message for the professionals in the Venezuelan military and security forces. The brutal dictatorship of Maduro has led to this man-made crisis. Cuba and Russia have invaded your country and disgraced your sovereignty. You have a chance to do the right thing and alleviate the suffering of your people and your families, those you have sworn an oath to protect. When a legitimate democracy has been restored, we look forward to having you return to the profession of arms, including attendance in the United States military training and education. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Thornberry, thank you again for the opportunity to testify. The SouthCom team, our civilians and military members, and our families appreciate the support Congress has provided. We will continue to honor your trust and our fellow citizens have placed in us. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. Admiral, I'll start with you and picking up where you left off on Venezuela. What is sort of the military's role in what's going on down there? Because I agree with your statement that Maduro is not a legitimate president. We need to have a transition to a true democracy and a legitimate leader in Venezuela. I am concerned, though, that we would think that there is some sort of role for the U.S. military, given our history down there and given what we've learned about using the military to sort of change governments. What role do you see for our military in what's going on in Venezuela, and where do you see the limits of that role?
We've been focused on working with our regional partners, intelligence sharing, information sharing, gathering and generating a shared appreciation for the complexities associated with the problem, the impacts both in Venezuela, the horrific starvation, over 90% of the population starving, and the impacts of security with partners, and we're looking at a way to apply our security assistance in a mutually beneficial way. That's been the primary line of effort. Secondary line of effort has been focused on planning for non-combatant evacuation and protection of American citizens and lives within Venezuela. Prudent planning, as you'd expect, Chairman, for a combatant commander. The look in support of USAID was mentioned by our colleagues here. USAID, we've supported the delivery of humanitarian aid, and we're working and planning with USAID. And then more broadly, we're looking at a day after, when we have a democratic Venezuela, how do we work with our militaries in security cooperation that's representative of a normal mill-to-mill relationship?
Russia,
those have been
China,
our priorities, sir.
Iran,
but you do not see a role for the U.S. military in actually overthrowing the Maduro government, correct?
You both.
Our leadership's been clear. It has to be, should be primarily a democratic transition. We're in total support of the diplomacy, and we stand ready to support that effort, sir.
And one final question in this area on the sanctions. Obviously, Venezuela has many challenges. You outlined some of them. What role do you see U.S. sanctions on Venezuela having played in the economic difficulties that are there? And how do you balance sort of the pressure we want to put on the regime to change with the potential impact of those sanctions?
The misery of the people of Venezuela came about as a result of the illegitimate dictator's actions and inept way with which he's run the country, and China and Cuba's complete inclusion in that problem set. The sanctions have been a necessary tool to help apply pressure to accelerate the diplomatic efforts. The misery began and ends with Maduro.
And it's worth noting that, much like Putin and Russia, a huge part of the problem is that Maduro and his cronies take all the money. They don't care about the people whatsoever. They're, running a kleptocracy there, and the people are the ones who are paying the price for that. A couple quick questions on the border side of it, and I'll shift over to the policy folks. It seems, if you go back before the Trump administration started implementing its immigration policies, we are in much worse shape now than we were when that started. Do you see any connection between a variety of those policies and what's happening on the border? And if so, have you started to talk about how you might do things differently? And I guess that's for Mr. Rapuano.
So we do not deeply assess the causation in terms of the desire of individuals to immigrate to the United States and how that contributes to illegal immigration. Our support is to Department of Homeland Security, which is responsible for that mission, and we are providing support in that role, the support that's appropriate for the Department of Defense to provide.
But surely you're around for the conversations about what policy might make sense. So I'm just curious, as someone who's involved in this, and the Department of Defense is now deeply into what's going on to the border because Homeland Security has asked for a lot of money and a lot of human resources. What is your thought about how we can adjust that policy to improve the situation?
Well, I can